it hit me like a ton of bricks when we were at Michael Jordan's golf course. Mm-hmm. The first thing that Jordan says to me, "What'd you do, man? How come you aren't announcing the races? You're NASCAR." He goes, "Why aren't you announcing races anymore?"
Oh, wow.
And I sat there and I was like, oh my.
Following is a production of Dirty Mo Media. All right, everybody. So Rick Allen is out in the lobby here at Junior Motorsports, waiting to come in here. And I asked him, I said, "Hey, man, want to bring you on, want to tell people about what you've been up to. People are probably curious as to what you're doing with your time now that you're not broadcasting or doing play-by-play in NASCAR. And how did all that happen? What was that experience like for him? How did that feel?" I think you'll be surprised by his story and reaction. He's a friend of mine, somebody who I think it's the kind of guy that, like, if you got something going on in your life or you need some really serious advice that you could trust with just one person, he's that person. He's just, aside from being a great play-by-play guy, he's one of the best people that I've met in our industry. There's somebody out there that's going through something. Rick's always trying to reach out and assist however he could, and just a great heart and a hard worker, and looking forward to seeing what he's been up to. So let's bring him on here. Rick Allen on Dale Jr. Download.
I figured you really need a Dale Earnhardt t-shirt.
Yeah, I
so
loaned you this.
I thought it. Oh, that's right. That's yours. I brought it back to you.
All right.
Okay, that's right. Junior knows that I swear a lot. Can I swear?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
You don't swear at all. What are you talking about? All right. So this is a funny story, this chair. So Rick is a carpenter, and his business is Barn Shop Creations, Custom Woodworking. And this is his hat, which I'm thankful to have. Beautiful. Love the color. But he made this chair for Isla when she was born 6 years ago. And the lid was glued on, and it had, somehow or another, we had left it sitting on the back porch, and the weather and condensation and so forth made the glue release.
It weathered.
I tried to drill down through here and put 4 screws in it, and I didn't even have enough screws or anything, or countersink bits or none of that stuff. And so Amy got really mad at my effort to try to fix the stool, and I had to send it back to my man here, Rick Allen, and he fixed it. And so now we have.
And actually, Amy told me that she said Isla gets put in timeout and sits on her chair, and I thought, well, thank you guys. Now I'm
the timeout chair
for
guy?
Isla. Yeah, for Isla, it's like, oh great, you gave me the chair back. Now I get to go in timeout.
That's not exactly entirely true.
Okay.
A lot of time they spend time out on the steps of our staircase.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And that's kind of a quiet spot for them to think about whether they want to start behaving.
Yeah.
So Rick Allen, man, I am glad to have you here. We've become great friends over the years working together with NBC. And I find the first thing I see right here, 55 years old. No way. That's just 5 years older than me. Why do you feel like you're?
How old do you think I was?
I feel like you're like 10 years older than me.
Okay. Is that
you
because
just have this very mature?
Oh.
Sort of,
nice.
You sound mature. You handle yourself a certain way.
When I have a beard, it's all gray, so that's probably why.
Well, so is mine. But, anyways, a young 55. That is.
I feel 60, so maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
My body's wearing out.
Man, well, so we're here today to talk about your career, what you've been up to. The broadcasters in our sport have. It's funny for me to talk about this to you because you're literally a pro at all of that. But the broadcasters in NASCAR and in most sports become so synonymous.
Yeah.
And for you to have done this as long as you had, and to, for lack of a better way to articulate it, disappear. You disappeared. This tends to happen, right? Drivers retire, you didn't retire, but drivers will retire, and then you just don't see them.
Yeah.
Right? And there's no reason for you're not going to go if there's no reason for you to be there. But and so people may be curious, I think, to find out what you've been up to.
I'm sure.
But I want to talk about your story and your path to get there.
Okay.
Born in June 17, 1969, Grand Island, Nebraska.
Yes. No water anywhere nearby, so have no idea why the town was called Grand Island either.
Really? An accomplished track and field collegiate star.
You want me to expound on that? Or are you gonna give some kind of credentials or something there? Because
you were a walk-on at the University of Nebraska,
Yeah.
and you would become a 3-time All-American. And you won 2 Big 8 conference decathlon titles.
Yes. I was in the Olympic trials in 1992.
Damn.
Competed for the United States in 93 internationally.
Really?
That previous life. Yeah, that was
Isn't that wild?
fun time. Exactly. Yeah. It's like you had no idea, which is fine.
Yeah.
It's okay. I don't talk about a lot of things like that.
I knew that you were an athlete in college and so forth, but I didn't know details, and no one listening knows.
Yeah.
A decathlon is a 10-event competition.
Yes.
Running, jumping, throwing events. What are you throwing?
You throw the shot put, the discus, and the
So
javelin.
you had to be good at all this or
Yeah.
decent, right?
Yeah. You have 5 events a day, and you had to be pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wasn't
Could you be
great at anything, but I was pretty darn good at everything. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And when did you learn, man, I can do this? Because that's
It's kind of like with woodworking and with everything else, with television, it was when I set my mind to something, I can accomplish it. And I think that's just what you did as a kid. You know, you set your mind to being a great race car driver, and you put the work in,
Yeah.
and you are a Hall of Fame race car driver. So, I mean, that's kind of what I did is when I found out that I had some success and some athletic abilities, I just focused on being the best I could be. And
now this sounds exactly like the most Rick Allen thing ever. Rick,
no.
You would get bored during the meets and grab the public address microphone, instructing the crowd before races, quote, "Quiet for the start, please."
That was the first thing I ever did. Quiet for the start, please. That was
Just
the
like
first thing.
that?
Exactly. Yeah, because you got to get the crowd
Did you have
quiet.
that voice as a
I did.
college?
I had it in high school.
You had this voice?
This voice, yeah. But in English class, when we did a speech or something, and I remember finishing the speech, and the teacher just sat there and she stared at me and she goes, "You're going to be in radio someday." But she didn't care about the speech or anything else. She was like, "You sound like you're going to be in radio someday." I went, "Okay, maybe."
And so this is the start of your announcing,
Yep.
career.
So, yes, when I was bored in between events and track and field, grab the microphone and I would say, quiet for the start, or the long jump is about to begin, just things like that. And then one day I asked the sports information director at the University of Nebraska, I said, "Is there a sport that I could announce? I mean, I'd like to announce.
Yeah.
I think it'd be fun." And I did a women's gymnastics meet.
Very first time you ever did anything.
Very first thing I ever announced as far as a sport was a women's gymnastics meet. And I didn't know anything about women's gymnastics. And so a guy sat next to me and told me everything to say, and then I would say it.
Oh, wow.
And then it got to where they're like, "Oh, you're pretty good at this. You might want to keep going." So then I did baseball, and then I did some other things. And it ended up where I said, okay, if you had a job where I could announce every sport at the University of Nebraska, I would take that job. And they're like, we've got people in all these areas. And so the spring game of 1994, I believe it was, came up for football, and the announcer couldn't be there. And so they said, "Would you do the spring game?" I'm like, "Of course I'll do the spring game. That'd be great." So I did the spring game, and when it got done, they were starting to do renovations to the stadium. They were putting in big screens and a new sound system and all that. And the athletic director got all of this praise. He was like, "We love that new sound system. It sounds so great. We can understand and hear everything that was being said." And the athletic director was like, "We actually haven't put the new sound system in yet. That was just a new guy that was there." And so he said he pretty much had to hire me then. But that's how it all started. They ended up hiring me. I was the voice of Nebraska football for 10 years.
10 years?
Yep, from 1994 till 2003.
When you how do you decide that you're done being an athlete?
Well, like a driver, you don't really decide. And in track and field, it's way different because I was a professional athlete as a track and field athlete, but all I got was apparel, glasses, and shoes.
Didn't make any money.
You didn't make any money, so I had to have a job outside of being an athlete. And it was called USA Decathlon, Visa Decathlon. They had sponsored like the United States decathlete. So the top 20 in the country would come together twice a year, and you would train, and they would kind of tell you, this is how you need to train, this is what you need to do. And so I would do that, and I realized that there was so much work going into it. And in the end, it was like, okay, you could be an Olympic athlete, but you're still not going to really make any money at it. And I thought, I don't know if I want to put all that work into being an athlete and just saying I was an Olympian and then not making any money at it.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm going to start doing something that I can make money at. So that's where broadcasting, and I worked with the big screens at the University of Nebraska. That was kind of the first real job that took the step toward becoming a broadcaster.
The broadcasting for Nebraska was a paying job.
Yes.
You made a living.
Yes. $6 an hour.
Oh.
And everybody in the state of Nebraska was like, wait a second, hold on. Hold on.
Right.
The voice of Nebraska gets $6 an hour, so he gets $18 to call a football game? I was like, yep, that's what I get, $18.
And so
but it was a position.
What'd you do the rest of the week?
Edited videos, did things for – well, I emceed every event that our coaches and things did. I got to be really good friends with Tom Osborne. Tom Osborne's a very good friend of mine. And
who's he?
Tom's the head coach, or was the head coach at the University of Nebraska. He's Hall of Fame coach, 255 wins over 25 years. So averaged over 10 wins a season in college football. That's pretty good.
Where's Eagle Raceway?
Just outside of Lincoln, Nebraska.
Did you know anything about racing?
Not at all. Not one thing.
And how did you get connected to go over there?
The guy who bought it, Craig Cormack, bought Eagle Raceway, and he was going to put money into it, and an avid race fan. He's still an avid race fan to this day. Good friend. He bought the racetrack. He was also a donor at the University of Nebraska, and so he called me up and he said, hey, I want you to announce at my racetrack. It's like, I don't think I'm your guy. I said, I don't know anything about racing. I'm not sure that would be a good fit. And he said, you got a great personality, great voice, love your demeanor. I want you to call my races at the racetrack. And I was like, okay, I'll come out.
Yeah.
And so he goes, what's it going to take for you to call these races? And I went home to my wife and I said, okay, this is every Friday and Saturday night of the weekend during the summer that I've got to be out at this racetrack. So we've got to make it worth it. I can't leave or do anything. So, what do you think we should ask him to pay us to do this? And she goes, well, I don't know. Maybe go high, like shoot high and see if he'll, negotiate or whatever. And I said, okay, what do you think's high? And she's like, well, what about $200? And I was like, that's pretty high. I don't know if they'll go for that. And sure enough, he said, oh yeah, I'll pay $200. Sure. So I was making $200 a weekend calling races at Eagle Raceway. And that's where a guy named Tom Deery, it was a NASCAR sanctioned track. And Tom Deery came in 1999 and said, hey, there's going to be some new partners, TV partners, that are going to take over NASCAR. And they're looking for talent, different people. And he said, send a demo tape in. And I was like, okay, whatever. And I didn't think anything of it. And about 2 weeks later, the owner, Craig Cormack, he calls me and he said, hey, they're looking for your demo tape. I said, I don't have a demo tape. I don't even know what a demo tape is. They said, well, send something that has you announcing. And I said, I don't have anything to be announcing. And so they took a video of, one of the night's races where you could hear me over the PA and sent that. And then I had done a cellular phone commercial with Barry Switzer and Tom Osborne, and I sent that. And sure enough, I got phone calls from both Fox Sports and NBC at the time saying, we'd like you to audition. And so that's how I met Darrell Waltrip and came to Charlotte. And so in 2000, May of 2000, I came and auditioned with Darrell Waltrip and a bunch of other people, because this was with Fox. Fox was looking for new announcers. They were actually looking at me as a play-by-play announcer right away. And I thought that was a little bit odd, because they'd originally said something about maybe a pit reporter, don't want to throw me into the deep end right away. But they said, no, we'll look at you as a play-by-play announcer. And so when I sat down to audition with Darrell, I'm 30 years old or something. I'm a kid, don't know anything about racing, nothing about NASCAR. I'd studied, but, nothing. So I sit down next to Darrell, and I'm like, hey, Mr. Waltrip, my name's Rick Schwieger. Nice to meet you. And he's, shakes my hand, and he's kind of looking, and he's got some papers, and he's going to be new, but they knew he was the Fox guy. And so he kind of sat there a second, and he looks back at me, and he goes, Schwieger? He goes, ain't no Schwiegers in NASCAR. And I'm thinking, oh boy, this ain't going well. This is my audition. And the guy that's going to be a part of the team just told me that there ain't no Schwiegers in NASCAR.
Yeah.
And so camera rolls, and there's a big script on there, and it's, hello, everyone, next to three-time Winston Cup champion Darrell Waltrip. I said, I'm Rick Yarborough. And I, keep going, and Darrell just starts laughing. He's like, wait a minute. He goes, you can't change your name in the middle of a show. And so we did probably 3 or 4 or 5 takes, and I just kept changing my name. I was Rick Petty. I was Rick Allison. I was probably Rick Earnhardt. I just kept changing my name, pulling out the most famous names in NASCAR. And so Darrell and I hit it off immediately, and we had a great rapport. And so he was wonderful. I came back in December. They said, you're too green during that audition. I came back in December, and they said, maybe the pre-race show host. We'll have you, audition for that. So I met with Jeff Hammond and Darrell Waltrip again. That was in December. And then at the end of that, they were kind of like, yeah, we'll call you. And then they started in February, and your dad passed away in that wreck. And I immediately texted Darrell, and I said, I'm so sorry. That was a friend of yours that, had lost his life. And didn't hear anything back from anyone for 2 years.
Damn.
And then in 2002, David Hill of Fox Sports, he was the chairman at Fox Sports. David Hill called my cell phone and was like, if you're still interested, we may have a spot for you. And so they had me fly back to Charlotte in 2002, and I auditioned with Dorsey Schrader and Barry Dodson.
Yep. And
I became the Truck Series play-by-play announcer. So it started in 2003.
When did you change your name?
Right before that. We were sitting in a big room with all these people, Rick Miner and Keith D'Alessandro. It was his first producing. And they were all like, what name are you going by? And I was like, I don't know. Has anybody got any ideas? And I'm like, well, no. You need to choose something. And I said, well, my middle name's Allen, so it would be easy if I just go with Rick Allen. They said, done.
Perfect.
Done. Rick Allen. You're Rick Allen from here on out. And I was like, okay. So
how does that work the rest of your life?
When I'm at a racetrack,
you're Rick Allen.
Anybody that calls me Schwiegs or Schwieger, I know they're close friends. Everybody else, it's like, okay,
but
they
it
know.
Hasn't created any kind of interesting hurdles or
no
complications at all?
None.
Never.
None whatsoever. It's been good, actually. There's an anonymity to it.
Do you watch enough today to have any idea of who in your mind is somebody that you see as a star on the rise?
The guy sitting behind me, or to my side over here.
Andrew?
Yeah. So we talked about it before I came in here.
He's been doing some radio.
He has, and that's great. And everybody I've always talked to, and you get it all the time, I'm sure too, but people always ask, how do you get your foot in the door? What do I need to do to get into broadcasting? I know everything about NASCAR, and I just want to be a part of it. And I just say, immerse yourself and make yourself available to do stuff that maybe somebody else won't do. And that's volunteer and go and just help out at your local track and do that. And so Andrew was a guy who, I don't know, maybe he was 13 or 14 years old when I first met him at the racetrack. He came and interviewed me. And I was like, that's pretty cool. You know, this kid's passionate enough about it that he's taken those steps. And so when I saw that you guys had him here and he was handling the Dale Jr. download, I thought that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So
I like seeing that. I just think there's young talent all the time, and I knew that, because I was that guy.
Yeah.
22 years ago, 23 years ago. There's going to be new people that come into the sport, and that's just, it's cyclical, and it's going to happen. And so picking one or two people out, I wouldn't say I know who those one or two are, but I do know that Andrew's very talented.
In the Cars Tour, I put together a little booth for the Cars Tour a couple years ago with Eric Brennan and Blake McCandless.
Yeah, so
Eric is.
I've heard Eric, and I think he does a great job.
He does.
Yeah.
I think he's getting some opportunities in ARCA, which is fun to see. But I'm going to have to find the next Eric. Yeah. Once Eric goes up, there'll be another.
Well, if there's a spot.
And Harvick, you ain't going to do a Cars Tour race.
Why wouldn't I?
I don't know.
I'd be willing to do anything.
Jeez.
I'm making tables right now. I'm making chairs.
You're still working for $6 an hour?
Maybe. For friends.
Harvick is texted me the other day about he was at a ball game, some kid in the booth, and he's like, kid's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to talk to him if we got a spot, pit road, whatever.
That's good. That's where you find it too. Yeah. You just,
just like you, just
ultimately, I have regrets in the fact that probably two big regrets in racing. I never met your dad. Mm-hmm. I would have loved to have met your dad. And I never met Bill France Jr. Mm. And Bill France Jr., I have come to learn, he was the one who told Fox Sports and NBC, he's like, I want this kid announcing my races. And I had no idea until he had passed away that it was him that said, hey, I want this kid announcing my races.
Hey, everybody, you want the latest Dale Jr. download apparel? Visit shop.dirtymomedia.com. We're always adding new stuff all the time, especially like when we say something silly on this show. We'll put it on a T-shirt. Again, check it out at shop.dirtymomedia.com. You would become the quickly, just thinking back over the years when you were doing the trucks, you quickly become sort of this trusted voice for the Truck Series. And you worked alongside Phil and
Michael.
And it seemed like that was like a decade. How long did you do that?
11 years.
11 years.
Yeah. It was over a decade.
So
yes, it did.
I know.
Maybe it felt like that because it was.
Yeah. So it's just hard to imagine that all this got packed into 55 years. But, I think the fans truly enjoyed the work you did in the Truck Series. And the Truck Series was sort of coming into its own as well.
Yeah.
And it had this dedicated booth, which I thought is very important.
Yes, I agree.
And it is it's proved out, right? As we're seeing the Xfinity Series now have its own dedicated booth as well with the CW. But talk about those years of working in the Truck Series and sort of learning the sport.
Right. And that was I have so much respect for the late Bobby Hamilton. Bobby was so generous with not only his time, but also he let us get into trucks. I mean, we went to Nashville, the fairgrounds, and he let us get behind the wheel of trucks. Ray Dunlap and I are out there running around in race trucks.
Yeah.
And I was loving it. I was loving life. I was thinking this is great. And he was very, like I said, generous with not only his time, but with equipment and such. And then everybody, that was the one thing I learned early on. I'm an outgoing person when it comes to meeting people, and especially in my profession or what I'm doing. So I had no problem walking up to anybody, Ron Hornaday, Jack Sprague, Bobby Hamilton, whoever it was. I mean, the stars, Todd Bodine, all the stars at the Truck Series, I would hang out with them.
Yeah.
I'd just sit in their stalls. I would do whatever and learn and absorb as much as I could about everything. And Phil and Michael were wonderful as well. Got to just spend time with the the stars of the sport at the time. It was Truck Series. Spent a lot of time, actually not a lot of time, but got to spend time with Benny Parsons before he passed away, just because of being Phil's brother and at the racetrack together. And he would always critique us, which was always fun to hear Benny. He's like, well, I really, you guys had a great broadcast. That was, wonderful. And so it was awesome to hear,
What could he be critical about?
Oh, he could have been critical about everything.
I want to know.
It would have been easy for him because he was so great at being a broadcaster. I mean, not only a racer but a broadcaster too. But we would ask him things like, have we told the story of the race? Did the race unfold and we tell everybody why this guy won or what happened to put this guy back into 10th or something? And he's like, yeah, you guys told a lot. And that's a lot on a producer. But it's also, as you know now, it's a lot on the broadcasters because when you're calling a race, there are so many things that are happening because you have so many different players on different strategies, different ideas, different agendas. And to be able to tell why somebody who you didn't talk about most of the race came up and finished 5th, you need to be able to tell that. Yeah. And sometimes you can't see it and you don't know it unless you have the right people that are there that can say, well, this guy, he did this, he didn't change tires. He, just fuel only. And he jumped up here because he knew that it was going to go caution at the end of the race. And he, ended up making up a lot of spots. So it's those types of things. And that's one of the things Benny would be critical about is, did you guys tell why this guy finished where he did or why this guy won the race or, why this guy was back in a wreck, those types of things. And so it was that was the fun part, and that's what I loved from you, from Burton, from Letarte, everybody I've worked with. Yeah. You guys see races different. I mean, you see a race different than a spectator would. Like I came from stick and ball sports, and I didn't see the things that when I was around Darrell Waltrip, the things that he saw blew my mind. Like he would see things and I'm like, wow, okay, didn't think about that. He would see brake dust on wheels and say, he's got a problem with his front brakes, or he'd do this, or he'd say all these things. And I'm like, how did you know that? How do you see those things? And it made me look at things differently, look for things that I wouldn't have normally looked at because I was a casual viewer watching a race. And all of a sudden now I learned, okay, there's a lot more that goes into why this guy is, he's loose or why this guy is tight or whatever. And you can see different things. And I would learn that from you guys because you're watching those things and you're pointing them out. And, to me, I'm like, wow, okay, that's why. Yeah. And as a viewer at home, we love that. That's what I loved. And so that's kind of what I took on as my role is I'm a viewer watching with everybody else learning from you guys.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest moments or memorable moments from that experience kind of,
with trucks?
Being in charge of the Truck Series, being the voice of the Truck Series.
Yeah. My very first race, the very first race I ever called was the Daytona race, and it was the Daytona 250. And I was so caught up in the moment. I'm at Daytona. It's the mecca of all motorsports, and I'm calling this race, and it comes down, and it's a photo finish. Yeah. There's 3 trucks side by side coming across the line, and Rick Crawford wins the race. And I say, Rick Crawford wins the Daytona, and I'm about to say 500. I'm about to say it because it's like the biggest thing. And I paused, and I'm like, 250, and I thought, wow, okay, I gotta focus on this stuff because I get caught up as a fan. That was the first race I ever did. Dorsey Schrader saying that they were going to be 5 wide at Martinsville. That was one of the funnier things because I remember after he said it, Michael Waltrip goes, "I don't think so, Dorsey. Yeah. I don't think they're going to be 5 wide." All the finishes at Atlanta, like for some reason the trucks, and this is before it was the previous configuration.
Old Atlanta, yep.
Yeah, for some reason the trucks put on a phenomenal show there. And that was where you would see guys sliding through the grass sideways, finishing second. It was like, okay, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And just, I mean, I guess just earning the respect of all of the drivers and the competitors and the teams.
Did 10 years feel like it flew by?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
How did you put yourself in position to get considered at NBC?
Didn't do anything.
They just called you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the way it's been. I'll say that. I know that we're probably going to get into how all this ended, but that's the way it's been almost my entire life. Like, I would get a phone call, like the dirt track. Guy called me.
Yeah.
I want you to announce at my dirt track. Fox calls. We want you to audition. So I've been called almost for every job I've ever got.
Yeah.
And so when Cup racing came around, an executive at NBC called me up and said, hey, we're going to take over the broadcast in 2015, and I want you to come have lunch with us, but I'm thinking that you're going to be the play-by-play guy.
Yeah.
And I went, okay. And so I flew to Connecticut and had lunch, and they were pretty much like, yep, we wanted to make sure you were a good guy, and so let's put together the plan, and you're the guy.
Did you know about so how do you go back and tell Fox, and they're like, well, yeah, we can't stand in your way. They didn't have a Cup opportunity to offer you.
No, because Mike was entrenched in Fox and phenomenal. He's synonymous with broadcasting NASCAR. I mean, he's the voice of NASCAR. He's been wonderful. And the joke there at Fox, originally when I came in, Mike would always say, because the executives at Fox, they, David Hill liked me and those people, and Mike would always say, hey, just let me get a couple more years before you take over.
Yeah.
Let me get a couple more years. And that was always the joke. But we always knew it was Mike's timeline. Whenever he wanted to step away, he will do that on his own timeline. But NBC said we're not going to negotiate. So we're not going to get into like a bidding war. So if Fox comes back and says, they're going to give you this or whatever, he said it's either you're going to be the play-by-play for us or you're not. And so I contacted an executive at Fox Sports and just said, hey, this opportunity's there. That's what I've always wanted. I always want to be at the elite level, the highest level of whatever I'm doing. And I said, NBC's giving me that opportunity. And so they were like, okay, but just remember that, you could still be a part of the Fox family at some point in time. And I went, okay, great. I appreciate that.
Did you know who was going to be in the booth with you right away?
Initially, yes. Mm-hmm. So, but we had to keep it a secret. And so it was kind of funny because I went up to Jeff Burton and I was kind of like, hey, how you doing? He's like, hey, we're not supposed to be seen together. And okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And on pit road too, Letarte. I would see Letarte and he's like, no, we can't. We can't talk.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's
man.
We can't talk. I'm like, okay. All right. I get
Dang.
it. So, yeah, I knew it was going to be those two guys. I was very excited about that. We got together way before anything, went golfing, way before Burton was actually a good golfer.
Is he a good golfer now?
He's a good golfer now.
Wow.
He's gotten way better,
Damn.
incredibly improved. But so anyway, we went and spent time together, which is kind of how you and I spend a little bit more time together because once we knew that you were going to be a part of the team, I can't remember. Did I drive or did you drive when we went to Martinsville?
I think you drove.
I think I drove.
Yeah.
We were in my Jeep. But yeah, we drove to Martinsville. I came, picked you up, and drove to Martinsville. But I like to get to know somebody not as, Dale Jr. the driver, but the person. Mm-hmm. And that's what we did with Letarte, Burton. I've done that with everybody,
The first race as the play-by-play for NBC.
Pretty memorable for you.
July Daytona. Yeah, I won the race. Austin Dillon ends up in the grandstands.
We thought he was dead.
Yeah.
We did. And that's probably one of the more memorable races that I've ever called because it was exciting. Obviously, you have such great success on super speedways and at Daytona, and you win that race. And as I call you winning that race, we see Austin Dillon into the fence. Mm-hmm. You see Austin Dillon in the fence in your mirror and kind of like, oh, my God.
Yeah.
And
scary.
Immediately, now that's the first race that Burton and Letarte had ever done.
Ever.
So it was kind of funny, and it's a visual, but you won't be able to see it if you're listening to this. But they creeped back, like that Simpson episode where he
goes into the
bushes. They creep back away from everything and sit down. Like when that happens, because they didn't know what to do. Yeah. They didn't know what to say. And at the same time, it was so bad that, that car's going 200 miles an hour to zero.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this is bad. This is really bad. And I have always been able to take things like that and not be overwhelmed by stuff. And so I knew in my mind, I knew that I was getting ready to say that there was a serious injury and potentially a fatality. Mm-hmm. And the somberness of that, broadcast happened immediately. So we were elation. You had just crossed the finish line. And then all of a sudden we're transitioning to, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen. And then the crews went down there and were giving you the thumbs up that he was okay. And it's like, wow. So the emotions that happen in literally, 30 seconds are, you're at a high because, the adrenaline you get of calling a race and wow, a big win. And, Dale Jr., the biggest name in the sport, just won. And now all of a sudden, oh my gosh, here is, Austin Dillon, and his car is just a square now. There's nothing on it other than just the roll cage. And we think he's passed away. And then all of a sudden he gets out of the car and he waves, and you're like, wow, okay. So that was a crazy race. And it ended up where that race ended at like 2 a.m. or something too. I think it was because it was rain delayed. And we were hanging out with the execs eating pizza afterwards in the hotel. And they're like, okay, that was a pretty good start. They're like, that was a pretty good start.
Yeah.
So that was first race.
I think that's important to understand how to handle those kind of moments. And they talk about that. Silence is sometimes better than saying anything in a lot of moments. But when there is an accident, we're told to never assume. And I mean, I think as an analyst, I would have probably done the same thing. I would have stayed quiet, let you sort of handle the introduction of the moment, right? This is we just saw this. This is what has happened. We're waiting. And but all the while, if you open your mouth and say anything in that moment, it can't ever be speculation.
Right.
And it's hard not to, not to speculate even for the best toward the positive.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
And you can't.
Right.
Because you don't know any facts.
I had an incident happen early in the Truck Series, and it involved Darrell Waltrip and David Rudiman. Mm-hmm. So David, I think it was Kentucky. I can't remember exactly, but I think it was at Kentucky. He was in a bad accident. Bad. And they get the ambulance out. They put him in the ambulance, and they're sending him not to the infield care center. They're sending him to a hospital. And so we're doing the broadcast, and I'm friends with Darrell Waltrip, and so I get a text on my phone.
Oh.
He says, Darrell Waltrip says, hey, I've been talking to David. He's doing fine. They're just taking him there to evaluate him, but everything looks good. And so I'm sitting there as a green announcer, as was early, not knowing kind of what you just said about speculating. And I thought, well, it's not speculation because here's team owner. Yeah. Team owner just said he's fine. He's talked to him and he's on his way. So I start this announcement more or less with, we have somewhat circumvented NASCAR on this one. I said, Darrell Waltrip just texted me. He's been talking with David Rudiman. He's doing well. He's on his way to on the way to the hospital, but they're just going to evaluate. But looks like he's going to be fine. Well, Mike Helton immediately calls to the speed people. He'll never say that again. Let's just make sure that those words never come out of his mouth again. We've somewhat circumvented NASCAR on this one. So I learned a lesson very quickly. And Mike never actually talked to me. It was just our producer and all the heads at Speed at the time. But he was like, don't ever do that again.
Damn.
And I'm like, okay, all right. I learned. I
Yeah.
learned my lesson. But it was just so easy because it pops up on my phone.
Yeah.
Here's
Yeah.
Darryl Waltrip telling me
Yeah.
that the driver's fine. He was on his way to the hospital. I thought all the fans are going to want to know.
I know.
Yeah.
It's funny because we'll be in the booth working, and there's times when like that happens, right? You get privy information or you know something, and you're like, is this something I can share or shouldn't I?
Can I say this?
And one of the things I think Latart's really good at, and I've worked, and it's something that I've had to sort of wrestle with or try to improve on with this show, our Tuesday show mostly. When something happens in the sport, I was like, damn. I was like, sometimes I'm not sure which side I'm on. You know?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm just not sure which side I'm on.
Right.
Like, I need a little more time, a couple more days, or a few more looks at a replay, or I need to hear that driver's explanation before I can confidently say that was right or wrong. And Steve's like, well, in the moment, sometimes you can just ask the question.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn, I don't think to do that.
Just pose the question
Pose
to
the
get
question.
it out there.
Yeah.
You get it out there, and then it becomes
A conversation.
It becomes discussion.
Yeah.
And then you discuss it.
Yeah.
So I'll say congratulations to you for this last weekend.
Yeah.
But I'll pose the question to you. Do you still feel that this is the way a race should end? And then 2 hours later,
Yeah.
the fans go, what? Wait a second. What we just saw isn't how the race ended?
Yeah.
Do you still feel that that's the way it – because I'm on the other side. I'm like, once they pass inspection to get on the racetrack, they should never penalize them again.
Yeah. Now I could understand that. I would be fine with that, what you're proposing, if they were to increase inspection.
Yeah.
But that's a problem because to look at what they found, to look for what they found would take so much time for every single car that come through tech in the morning.
Right.
It's more reasonable to say, all right, we'll take the top three and we'll look at everything, right? And but we don't know who the top three are till the race is over.
Right. Let me pose this to you. What if the race ends, Love is the winner, they break it down in inspection, they find something, and they say, all right, here's the deal. You will not race next week unless you can convince us, or you can go through the process of telling us why that was legal when it's not. But if you can't, then you don't race next weekend. But at least the fans get to see the guy who won, and they get to remember it. I mean, Sammy Smith didn't get a picture.
Yeah.
He doesn't get a picture with the trophy. He doesn't get all of that celebration and everything. I think they stole it from him too.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's disappointing for me as a fan.
Yeah, I suppose. I think, though, your idea of when the checkered flag falls, the winner's the winner, is doable to a certain extent. There will be a day where there's something so egregious.
Yep, you're right.
That the court of public opinion will say, no, don't like this.
Yeah,
he shouldn't be able to keep the win because that's just too egregious. But I don't know. It's certainly not the best way to finish a race, but it certainly does get some conversation started. And I think now Jesse Love can go to Talladega with arguably one of the best cars in the field and get his redemption.
Oh yeah,
and then that's a great story, right?
Oh yeah,
and
we don't know what the appeal process.
No,
I mean, RCR is going to appeal, and we don't know how that goes. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, we'll have the conversation now, I guess, about me coming into the booth to work with you guys. So, from my perspective, I was out with concussion in 2016. I got an opportunity to get in the booth with you guys at Martinsville and do an hour. I had a blast. I had been listening to Ken Squire, but mostly Barney Hall in the 80s, playing with Matchbox cars and stuff in the floor and mimicking everything they're doing and like doing my races and talking like they were talking. And
you put a notebook together of Squireisms,
I did,
right?
Yeah. I had a little one sheet of Squireisms. Basically, I pulled every single one of them from the 79 Daytona 500. And I was going to take that one sheet with me, and I was going to use one of those every week.
Every race.
And that didn't last very long, but I got a few in. So.
And you changed a couple kids' names. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So,
you just whatever.
Yeah. I got out of that booth at Martinsville, and I got a text from a friend of mine, Marty Smith, and he said, "Man, I don't know if you want to, but I think if you wanted to do that, you could do it." And I was like, "You think?" And I was like, "I don't know, man. I don't know." And I'd never considered it. But I just did it because I wanted people to see that I was okay. The only reason I went there in Martinsville that day was to to let people see that I was not laying on a vegetable.
Yeah,
exactly. I was like,
you could talk, you were coherent, and you were with your buddy.
Yeah.
I mean, Steve was there.
Yeah,
I think that helped a lot.
Certainly, yeah. And but it ended up turning into a conversation around getting in the booth. Eventually, I ended up getting to work with you guys, and I will say, man, it was fun.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Yes.
It was so much fun. And I was nervous about y'all had this thing. Y'all been doing it for a couple of years, and it was y'all had a buddy system, and it was what it was. And I was like, hey, I want to do this with y'all. It's gonna be fun, but I don't want to mess up nothing y'all are doing. And I remember I took it so serious. Which you have to, but I was taking it so serious. One of our first races, we get to Pocono, and I mean, this is like 2 or 3 races in. It felt like, and the race starts now. The first couple of weeks, y'all handled me with kid gloves. Y'all are like, you get away with this, you get away with that, but you got to figure it out. And then we get to Pocono, and it felt like that.
Kid gloves were
game on.
We've taken the rookie stripe off. You're in.
So I don't know if you were even aware of this, and maybe it was all in my head, but we started that race, and we get to the end of stage 1, and I was standing there, and I was like, I ain't said 4 words. I hadn't said 10 words maybe in the whole stage, and I was so mad and frustrated. And our booths are right side by side.
Right.
Burton standing there next to me, and he could sense. He elbows me and goes, "We ain't gonna step out of the way. You got to get in here." He's like, "You got to force your way in here. We're not gonna stop and wait on you to say whatever it is you want to say. We're not gonna always pause and look over at you and go, what do you think?"
Right. Because I had teed you up a lot. Junior, what do you think? Or Dale, blah, blah. And I had teed you up, and it was kind of like, we're not doing that anymore. No more teeing him up. He jumps in when it's his time and when he feels like he wants to jump in.
Yep. And, man, I was struggling. And so then I think stage 2 and 3, I just like.
You were in.
I just took off.
Yes.
And
I think you took over my job a little bit there. You were calling the races. You were like, I'm coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was
so
good.
That was one of the things too. That was one defining moment for me in my career as a broadcaster. And then there was also, the kid in me that played with those Matchbox cars is still very much inside of, and I admired, as I said, Ken Squire, and when I was sitting in the top of this skyscraper in New York City with Marv and all of the executives, and I was stupidly naive enough to look over there and go, "Hey, I'm glad we're all doing this, but I just want y'all to know I kind of want to do a little play-by-play, in the middle of the race, like every once in a while, just be like, hey, hell of a battle right here. Look at
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, whatever. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm asking. I don't even know what I'm saying. And I think back to that moment. I'm like, God, it's so stupid. I should just kept my mouth shut. But I was really lucky because I did like to play I did like to pretend to be a play-by-play guy.
Yeah.
during the races, and you didn't mind. And that's my favorite thing about you is you knew that I badly wanted to be I badly wanted to bring that to the booth, and you would step back in the middle of some of these green flag runs and kind of just let me kind of have some fun. And I think that because I mean there's tons of work on your plate in those moments, and there was enough to go around, I suppose.
Oh yeah.
But
now can I
Yes,
interject a little bit here?
Yeah.
So you at some point in time had to, either it was in New York, whatever, that seed got planted in one of our bosses' head, and they decided that you would be the play-by-play for a race where I wasn't even going to call the race. And so, I felt confident enough in my abilities that I wasn't going to lose my job to
not
you
to me.
in that instance. But I remember thinking to myself, I wonder what Junior would say if Rick Hendrick came up to him and said, you know what, Rick wants to drive this race. Would you just sit out and Rick's going to drive the car for this race? What would you have said to that?
I'd be like, no, of course not.
Exactly. And I thought, so I wonder why I sit back and go, yeah, Junior can drive he can do the play-by-play.
Yeah.
I sat there and I thought, I wonder if he would do the same thing if I said, hey, can I drive your car?
Yeah. I didn't know. I mean, that did create some awkward. We never talked about it.
It wasn't awkward for us. And I never had, like I said, I wasn't worried.
Yeah.
I never thought, Junior's going to take my job. But it became.
That was a thing. That was a known. I knew it was not ideal. It wasn't the way you would have it.
Yeah, it was my job.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, like I said, I had no problem because I consider you a very good friend. And I had no issues with you.
Yeah.
It was how the public would say things and do things. And I'm thinking, okay, it looks like I'm being punished for being out of the booth. Yeah. And that's what people are seeing. And I thought, okay, I'm just being nice and not saying anything or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it should be negative.
Yeah.
in the social world.
Yeah.
And I'll admit right now, I looked at all that stuff
too much.
Way too much.
Yeah.
It's
hard.
Way too much. And it hurt.
Yeah.
Like I'd read stuff where, people would say how terrible and I think, oh my gosh, I don't think I'm terrible.
Right.
I think I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
And
so I think that's funny. I'm glad you bring that up because I've always held, even before I had any experience or any knowledge of how broadcasts happen and what a play-by-play guy's role is, and I always held the broadcast to a really high standard, like really, and just I had, I felt like that every broadcast ought to be, the best broadcast I've ever heard. And, I had certain opinions about the Fox booth or, and Daryl and Larry and those guys.
Right.
And I thought they had good days and they had bad days. And, and then there were things that they talked about that I thought that's not important. And then they were spinning yarn and creating things that weren't real.
Right.
And as a driver, I was very narrow-minded about it. Oh man, this is what's important. That's what you should focus on. Stop worrying about that.
Yeah.
And but I had no idea that there were production meetings and all kinds of things going on that had created these conversations.
People had worked all week long to put stuff together.
Yeah. I had no clue. I knew your job was challenging, but I did not really appreciate not only how challenging it was, but also how good you were until I got the chance to do play-by-play. And especially, I did a couple Busch races or Xfinity races, but then I think the Eric Almirola New Hampshire race. That was when I walked out of that booth and was like, that was freaking insanely fun, but I don't never need to do that again.
Right.
And
oh yeah,
I think it was because of who I am, because I'm Dale Earnhardt Jr., because I have all of these, have some leverage. I was able to shoehorn myself into that opportunity where probably most people wouldn't have. And I got to really look behind the curtain,
right,
and go,
oh yeah,
holy smokes. Yeah, I can't do this every week. Like, I got a long way to go before I can get to where I could do that job consistently. And I was thankful that I got to see that, because honestly, man, I mean, my friendship with you was great. But what it did do was make me have the respect for you as a play-by-play that you deserve, and that a lot of people, as you say on social media, didn't give you at times. And so, because I mean, I'm reading it too. I'm reading the for me. I'm reading what they're saying about me, right? And like, I was coming out of the gate, I was getting some really good positive stuff, and certainly I went to where I thought the positive stuff would be. I could probably find all kinds of negative if I went looking for that too. And I saw how critical people could be of you, of me, of Jeff, of Rick. I mean, of Steve.
Yeah.
And it was at times very brutal. And and what they say about the other side was just equally as bad, right? And I went from I wonder why they had this perception of Rick to going, damn, they don't know how good this guy is. They don't know how hard this job is, and they don't know how good he is. And
do you remember the race that I handed you, the pre-race? I think it was the pre-race rundown, and I said, you need to know this, because if something happens, you've got to know what's going to happen up there, because you just never know. Always be prepared for anything that could possibly happen. Yeah. And I remember you after that race, you were like, oh my gosh, I am so glad you gave me that, because what ended up happening was there was a weather issue, and the people that were doing the pre-race couldn't do it. Yeah. And you had to do it. And I think it was Michigan, actually. And it was kind of one of those where I was like, okay, I think I gave him all the information that I could give him, to best prepare him for this. But I remember after that race or the show, you were like, man, I'm so glad you gave me that, because I would have never even thought to have that. Yeah.
I would, as an analyst, try to prepare, but I would always watch you, and even Jeff and Letarte to an extent. And every week I thought I had all the things I needed, and I'd see you and I'd go, what? I didn't even think that I would even want that information or have that. And you're like, it was just like second nature to you. But I really became a big fan of yours. We were already friends. We were already colleagues. We were already working together. But going through that process and getting to do some of those play-by-play days, and I remember there was one. I really got to appreciate you. For people just don't know how good you are at making something that is very complex in terms, just talking about the pre-race, everything before the green flag, right? The 15 minutes or the half hour, the hour, whatever it is. You just run through it as smoothly as anyone I've heard, and every week it's choppy and different in the notes and the process and the production and the noises going on in your head, the people talking to you, but you just kind of you never got flustered, you never got up on the chip, you never got nervous. Like, it's obvious when I get nervous. I can see when Steve's nervous. I can see when Burton's nervous. I can see when any of us are flustered, but it was never obvious when we were having a tough moment or something wasn't the way it was supposed to be, whether it was weather or a delay or a problem on the track or some
monitors would go out.
Yeah, monitors or a tragic moment or whatever, right? It was, you were always, that was one thing that was so nice, man, is we would be in that booth and it was like, well, as long as Rick's here, we're never going to be in a bad spot, because you were just always going to be able to handle it.
But it was also me having enough trust in you and Steve and Jeff that if I did get into a corner, I could get out by asking you guys a question, or get us somewhere where we needed to go to continue that story.
I remember one race where you called and talked to us about how odd it felt to not be in the play-by-play booth. It was Darlington.
Yeah.
So there was a...
Well, that was throwback.
Yeah.
So we would have you and
me and
Petty and
DJ, but we only did stage 2.
Right.
And I guess the rest of the race, for that whatever reason, you did the pre-race, and then they put you on your motorcycle and you rode home.
I rode home. That was really weird.
You were like, and you put us on that motorcycle with you on that ride home, and you were like, y'all don't know, man. I'm riding home through South Carolina, heading north, while the race is happening. I'm supposed to be in the booth.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I'm not. And I was like, damn.
Oh yeah, it had been. I'd called every race, or had been a part of every race for probably 8 years or so. And it was just like I remember leaving before the race started, and I thought, what's going on? This is really weird to not be a part of this. And I let you guys know. I was like, this is kind of odd, guys.
Yep. One of the moments I wanted to talk about was the slide job, Chicago.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Got a new guy in the booth next door to you. It's you and Burton, and then me and Latard are in the booth together. But we're
very first race.
Yeah, we're very close together. Y'all again in the first half a dozen races, y'all kind of didn't. You gave me a lot of grace. As I got to understand how things worked, I realized, and adhered to this idea that, as we approach the white flag, there's a job that Rick's got to do. There's an ad buy on the white flag itself.
Right.
The last lap.
Sponsorship. Yeah.
Yep.
Got to say it.
All those things have to get handled. And when you're given that baton, you're more than likely going to pick up off of that ad mention to talk about that driver. If he's on his way to a sure victory, you've got something prepared there. But if there's a battle to call, that's your moment to call it. And now we were encouraged that if it made sense, by all means,
jump in.
Yeah. Just don't climb on top of what you're doing and saying with the same. But right. If there was something to add.
Yeah.
And so what a lot of people, I don't know if they know, but as we're racing at Chicagoland, and we had not seen a slide job in a cup race ever that I remember.
Yeah. Carl Edwards tried it.
He did.
At Homestead.
Yeah.
I think
he did.
It didn't work out, but yes.
So Larson drives down in there, and as he's coming up the racetrack, I was telling you.
Right.
I was looking at you saying slide job.
Shouting it.
Yes.
Slide job.
I know.
Slide job.
Yeah. And I was like, Rick, say it.
Yeah.
And
it's so funny too, because that was my racing background.
Yeah.
Dirt track racing is where Eagle Raceway
but a lot of people
slide job all the time. And
a lot of people think I was just shouting it to the middle distance.
You're telling me.
I was
say it.
Yeah.
Say slide job, Rick.
It's a slide job, Rick. He's pulling the slide job. There it goes. Oh, almost.
Yeah.
Because he got it right at the very end.
And that was your
he
very
just bails
first.
out.
Yes.
Right on the whole. If he'd have kept on coming up and it put Kyle in the wall, and Larson wins.
Probably wins the race.
And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Damn.
And then I can't remember, that was your first race. They made T-shirts.
Yes.
The NBC production people made T-shirts. And there was a video of a dad and his daughter that they emulated us. They kind of reenacted what we did, but the daughter's yelling, slide job! Slide job! And it was so fun to see stuff like that. And it was immediately, I think we were like, okay, this is good. This is good. We're going to have a good time.
Yeah. It was awesome. My bosses at NBC, our bosses at NBC, always kept telling me, just be you, just be you, just be you. And I was like, man, are you sure? Just be me, right? Okay.
Yep.
And because I thought I was going to get in there and like polish my voice and get sharp and start enunciating and getting everybody's name correct and just, be perfect, right?
Right.
And they were like, no, just be you. And there was really that vibe. Like you had to give other people room, and everybody was going to have something important to say every minute, and we all weren't going to be able to say those things. And I knew that there was some things that I badly wanted to share in the moment, but couldn't because somebody else was at the microphone. And you just had to be patient.
You were in a difficult situation too, though, because we had two separate booths. Mm-hmm. That's not normal. Yeah. That's not a normal.
I didn't know any different.
Exactly.
Which was so normal to me. It was normal.
Well, it was normal to you, but you're going to see, and you have seen before. I mean, when you have everybody in a booth, it's easier. Oh, it's easier because you can grab an arm, you can look at it, just the way you look at somebody, hand signals, all that stuff. It's easier. We had. I believe that was a mistake. I think we should have been, if they wanted 4 people to call a race, we should have all been in the same booth. Yeah. We should have been there because then there's a conversation that continues to go on, because that's really what we're doing when we're calling a race, is having a conversation about it. Why is this happening? I call something that's exciting or happens, and then you guys explain why. Yeah. And there's a conversation that goes on. And that was difficult to have that when you have 2 people in one booth and you're separated and you have 2 people in another booth. Sometimes we could see each other. Sometimes we couldn't.
Well, I'll say this. The other thing that really surprised me about working with y'all was how much time we spent together when we weren't working.
Yeah.
Like it felt like, now there were probably some moments that wasn't the case, but it felt like we traveled together. We rode in the cars to the track together. We hoteled in the same hotels. We were always together.
Yeah.
And when we weren't working in the booth, we were sitting in a trailer or working.
Wherever.
Sitting around
together.
Talking about what we were going to do and how the work was going to go.
Yeah. That's always been my philosophy with anybody I work with. I don't want it to be when the green light comes on the camera is when we start having our conversations. Yeah. I want to know about you. I want to know about Isla, Nicole, and Amy and everybody. I want to know about everything that's going on with you. And I wanted that to be that way with everybody I've ever worked with. Yeah. So I've always been like, hey, don't go hide somewhere. Come, we're going to go hang out and do this or that together. And hell, we vacation together. I mean, we've done all sorts of fun stuff together.
The friendship that came so easy with Letarte came just as easy with you and Burton. And to your point, we would end up taking our wives and all go on vacation together.
Right.
Which we had one of our best vacations with y'all.
It was great.
Zero drama. Everybody having fun. No.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Nothing.
Good times.
Yeah. Let's talk about a couple more moments in the booth.
Yeah.
The Hell Mail-In.
Hell Mail-In. Yeah. Which is really fun. We had a friend of ours that was behind Steve and I in our booth at Martinsville. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, I don't know why, but he had his camera and he videoed Steve and I call that last 2 laps or whatever it was. And so I got to see from a different perspective what that ended up looking like. Yeah. Because I knew, and you're well aware of this, that you have to know every scenario, especially in that situation, because that was an elimination race. So that we knew that somebody was getting eliminated there, and it was really coming down to Ross Chastain or Denny Hamlin. And Denny had enough positions that we're like, there's no way Ross can catch him because he's 3 positions back and there's only 1 lap. And it's like, okay, so I end up calling the winner of the race, and it's happening, and all of a sudden Letarte is tapping me on the shoulder and pointing, and he knows that he doesn't want to jump in because I'm calling this big part of the race. Christopher Bell wins, automatically going to get him into the playoffs, and this is a big deal, advancing. And Letarte is doing this and pointing, and I see the 1 go across the line right next to Denny. And I'm like, and the 1, Ross Chastain is going to advance and, makes the passes or whatever. But it was that teamwork that I probably wouldn't have noticed or remembered, because in the moment I kind of get lost in all that stuff that's happening. But it was that moment that I got to see where Letarte is tapping me on the shoulder, pointing like, okay, you've called this part of the race. This is big too. Now watch this. And we didn't know what was happening. You immediately were like, That's like that was a game move. I mean, he was a video game move that he just pulled there. And so you were watching Ross on the wall. I was watching Christopher Bell, and then Steve was able to kind of make sure that everything got put together. But that was teamwork at its finest right there.
That was a lot of fun. Me and I think Burton saw it immediately.
Burton did?
Yeah. Like Burton was on top of it. And that was like a moment where the work felt real special, because we did see something we'd never seen before. And it was very similar to the slide job moment. We were seeing something that we thought we'd never seen before. And I felt like we did a great job.
We were on it.
With it.
Yeah. That's what I think. That's, I guess, as far as when I think back to 22 plus years, I think over 600 races I've called. I think that's the one thing that I've been the most proud of is that I don't think we've missed like anything big.
Yeah.
Like the moment has never been bigger and been above what we have been able to deliver.
Yeah.
And I think that was the one thing that I've always been very proud of is that we rise to the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that I've just worked with people that are, you guys saw that, and we were able to explain exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you were part of some other memorable, iconic moments. Jimmy Johnson's 7th championship win, Kenseth wrecking Logano.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the crowd goes wild.
Yeah. And let's talk about how you got to where you are today.
All right. As a woodworker?
As a woodworker. So I have known for years that, you had a hobby as a carpenter, and you've built the house you live in today. You built the entire thing yourself, and you did all the wiring and everything, right? I mean, but the quality of work and the meticulous design and patience that you have to woodworking and building things, and you can literally pretty much build anything anybody wants you to build. It's really impressive, really, really impressive. You have a big old barn with a workshop and all the right tools to be able to fix all the right problems.
Yep. When a couple years ago when the market was booming and house prices were crazy, we decided my kids had already been out of college or out of the house, and we thought we have too big of a house. Let's sell our house. The market was great. We did. We moved into an apartment, and I immediately was like, okay, I've got to have a shop. No matter what, wherever we look, it has to have a shop. We have to have enough land that I can build a shop or whatever, because I missed that. I love woodworking. It's therapeutic for me, very relaxing. And so we stumbled across a piece of property that this barn was on, and I thought that'd be a pretty good shop. And the house was terrible. And so I got an excavator, and 6 hours later, the house was leveled and built a new house there on that property. But really, it was ultimately the barn and the shop that sold me on the whole property. So that it's always just been a passion of mine. My uncle was very instrumental in that. In college, I would go to his place. He had a shop, and we would build anything and everything.
Yeah.
And it was great to just kind of use your hands. And you mentioned meticulous. I just like just creating something out of nothing.
Yeah.
And when you take just a raw piece of wood and you make something out of it, you're like, at the end of the day, that's pretty cool.
We talked about that so much that I was starting to get wood making posts and reels in my algorithm and Instagram. And I would be like, oh man, that's pretty neat how he built that. I wonder if Rick knows about that.
And you'd send it to me.
I'd share it to you.
Oh yeah.
And you've built a few things for Amy and I and our kids. You're building some swings
right
for
now.
us right now.
Yep.
You have this hat with this business,
Barn Shop Creations,
and you don't have a website?
No,
not yet.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the website.
I know,
stuff.
but you have enough work. You have more than you can do.
No, probably not.
Yeah.
I could use more work.
How do people get in touch with you?
It's been word of mouth right now. It's been, you guys wanting to swing.
I'm going to holler from down the driveway. What am I going to do?
Well, I actually do have business cards actually too.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
They say Schwieger on there, though. Is that okay?
I'm sure that's okay. We'll post some information.
Yeah.
For folks to reach out.
I cabinetry, furniture, anything and everything.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's ultimately what I want to do. I love broadcasting. So if
well, let's talk about that. So, just in the past year, you went from being the play-by-play guy at NBC to not being the play-by-play guy, and there was a big cycle of hiring.
Yep.
TNT and Amazon came in, and there was options and CW and all that.
Yep.
And first off, I suppose, how did you learn that things weren't going to continue at NBC? I know that there was the 10-race playoff that they put Diffie on.
Yep.
And when did you learn about that?
I found out about that the day before the Hall of Fame in January. I think it was like the 18th or something. Hall of Fame, January 19th, and I found out on the day before at a lunch.
That you're going to do the whole year, but not the playoffs.
Well, as a matter of fact, at that time, they said I was going to do up until they didn't know exactly how many races, but they were going to have Diffie do the last however many races.
Right.
And I didn't understand that. I guess I didn't know why that would be the way you would transition somebody in and me out. I didn't think that was. I didn't know why. I went into that lunch meeting not having a clue that I wasn't going to have my contract renewed, because a couple months earlier, you were in the bus with me when we were told by an executive that we were going to have long-term deals and we were going to continue. And our team, our 4 guys, were going to stay together. And then they didn't renew your contract, and I was told mine wasn't going to be renewed. And so it was very different from what I had been told earlier, that it changed dramatically. And it was scary and it was weird. And so I immediately started, and I will say I was almost a zombie at the Hall of Fame. I was the MC, and they told me the day before.
You were heartbroken.
I was crushed. And I remember in the middle of that, the award ceremony, I got a text from you, and you said, "Hey man, I want to talk to you. So before we leave, let's talk." And that was very, very nice of you. And it was wonderful. I needed that at that time. You and Amy found me backstage, and we talked a little bit, bullshit, and that was reassuring, because I think at the time when that news hit me, it was kind of like, what am I going to do now if I don't get to hang out with my friends?
Yeah.
Do my friends go away? How does this, how does this affect my life? And so that was a crushing blow. Again, that January day. And then I carried that with me. The news didn't get out other than you guys knew about it until later. And they told me that there was nothing going to come out. And then all of a sudden it did. And then they told me don't do any release or response. And so you said I kind of disappeared. I did. I was told not to say anything initially. And then I kind of just thought, you know what, I'm just going to not say anything.
Would you have done it different?
I think so now, looking back on it, because I think it looked bad. Like, again, public perception was that I'd done something wrong.
So I disagree with that.
Really?
I know that you won't believe this, but when they would pluck me into the play-by-play, I was looking at public perception. I never looked at it like they're punishing you, because there was no motive for punishment. And so I didn't read... In reading all of the temperature of people's opinions about why this might be happening, I never heard, Rick's in trouble or Rick's being punished or anything like that.
Really?
I didn't. It was just like, but Dale's shoehorned himself into this opportunity, or Dale's asked for this and he's getting this little fun one-off, or they're calling it the driver's booth and it's just going to happen once a year at this race. And it was never really Rick's up and he's getting punished for it. And I didn't feel like that was what the perception was this past year.
Really?
What the perception is that you might have been okay with it. That was the one thing that I thought might be going wrong is that you were all right with this and that you were just going to go on and do something else. And I knew that wasn't what you thought.
Right.
But I was afraid that was the public perception is.
And maybe that's what it was. I don't know. Well, all I know is, and I'm going to name drop, but it hit me like a ton of bricks when we golfed with a bunch of guys. We were at Michael Jordan's golf course, and I had never met physically Jordan at any given time. I've been around him a couple times, but never talked to him. The first thing that Jordan says to me when I went up to him at his golf course, and I was going to say, hey, thanks for letting us play, and appreciate it. The first thing he said to me was, "What'd you do, man?" And I looked at him, and I was kind of thinking, I don't know what he's talking about here. And he goes, "How come you aren't announcing the races? You're NASCAR." He goes, "Why aren't you announcing races anymore? What'd you do?"
Oh, wow.
And I sat there, and I was like, oh, my. So not only does Jordan know who I am, which I was like, wow, okay. Yeah. But he thought I had done something wrong. And that's why they put Diffie in. Yeah. And so immediately I was like, I was like crushed because I thought, here's the most famous athlete on the planet. I think one of the greatest athletes ever. Yeah. And knows me, but is like, "What'd you do?" Yeah. And so, and
I can see how you could come to the conclusion that people thought you'd done something wrong.
Yeah. I mean, so that's why by me not saying anything and the way NBC did it, where they didn't make any announcements, they didn't say why or whatever, I think it looked like that I had done something wrong, and that's why I wasn't. And so I would have been more vocal. Yeah. Just so that people understood that it wasn't my choice. I did not want to not be back with NBC. I want to still call NASCAR races. I wanted to be a part of the CW or Amazon or Turner or Fox, anybody. I wanted that badly, and it didn't happen. Yeah. It never came to fruition with any of the other broadcast partners, and so it was. It's tough. But again, I love doing what I'm doing. So I mean that's great, but at the same time, I think I'm still pretty good at a play-by-play announcer. Yeah. So I'd love to still do something in that area.
During the process of, I talked to you a little bit during the process when the hiring started happening for the new partners that coming in. You didn't have an agent.
Not initially.
No. Correct. And then you ended up getting some representation.
Yes.
The hiring cycle concluded without you finding a role in a position anywhere.
Yeah.
What do you know, I guess, what your best foot forward is? If this is, because I know you still want to broadcast. Yeah. I know you still have a lot left in the tank. I think you're as talented as anybody. You have more experience than most. You'd be a great addition to any team. What's your foot forward?
So I did start off with a friend that was kind of help and because I didn't think I was going to need an agent. I thought, and again, I probably had too high of an opinion of myself. I thought, I've been announcing at the highest level of NASCAR for 10 years. Somebody's going to pick me up. One of these people I'm going to be a part of. And then after like the first couple communications with people where it wasn't we want to talk to you, I thought this might not happen. There's a possibility that I might not be in NASCAR. And so that's when I had been contacted by an agent that said, hey, I'd love to represent you. We love what you do. And she reached out and then she said, okay, we're going to focus on, the NASCAR because you've done it forever. You're a voice of that. You have a reputation there. We're focusing on that. And so she focused on that and we got down to where all the positions started to be filled and the music stopped and there wasn't a seat. Yeah. And I'm kind of going, okay, we need to look at other sports now. I've done track and field. I've done college basketball, done different things. I said, I think now we're going to have to broaden our horizons here a little bit. And so we've done that to the point where we've looked, but I think we focus so much on NASCAR for pretty much the whole season. And once all those spots were filled, we were behind as far as looking at other sports too. So so that's why it was like, you know what, I like building stuff, so I'm going to start a company. So Barnshop Creations.
But are you still hopeful that there will be another opportunity? I
would love to talk to anybody about the Cars Tour. Hey, if you pay more than $6 an hour. But I don't want to take Brendan's really good.
He's fine. He's going.
He's great. And I don't want to take anything away from a young guy and all that stuff, the rising. But at the same time, I do feel like I'm still very good at what I did. Yeah. And it's harder than most people think.
It is.
What especially racing. Now, I've done other sports, and they pale in comparison as far as speed and things you have to know. Racing is really difficult, very, very difficult to broadcast. And so I always felt you've experienced
like
that.
I don't think I've not broadcast another sport, but I always felt like that we were off the hook as broadcasters in racing, because once the green flag dropped, anything could happen, and it would.
Yes.
And so we could just be as surprised as the next person. We weren't expected to know. Like,
right.
I mean, I can analyze a little bit and guess what a guy might do going down in the corner, but you listen to the football broadcasts, and they're telling you what play's coming, what defense they're in, what play they're going to try to run, why they audibled or what they're audibling to. Right. And there's a bunch of here's what's about to happen.
Right. And that's Letarte.
Yeah.
I mean, Letarte is thinking about 4 different opportunities that a crew chief could come up with. Mm-hmm. And he's got that in his head. That's why he's great. Yeah. That's why he's so good at what he does. You, as a driver, you know the feel of what a car feels like. And if it's, you can see what it's doing. So he's crying about this. Watching his hands, he's doing this. He's going to be telling the crew chief he needs this. And that's where you guys are great at that. But as a play-by-play guy, I'm supposed to call what happens. And when it happens in a split second, I'm supposed to know exactly what's going on. Yeah. And I digress a little bit. One of the first ARCA races, not one of the first ARCA races I called, but early on in my career, Danica Patrick's first race was at Daytona. David Hill is there, the chairman of Fox Sports, and I'm relatively young. Danica Patrick is in her first stock car race. Mm-hmm. I'm calling it. And we're watching the race. A wreck happens. A green car is in the wreck. And after we call the wreck and everything happens and whatever, we go to commercial. David Hill comes in during commercial break, and he's like, Rick, you got to tell them it wasn't Danica. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. He goes, a green car was involved in the accident, and everyone might have thought it was Danica because it was a green car. And I was thinking, no, nobody would. Right? Her car is completely different. But he saw it as somebody watching for the first time may not have understood that it wasn't Danica.
Yeah.
And so they might have been tuning in because it was Danica's first race and all this. And he told me, you've got to say those types of things. And so I was learning on the fly, and that happened early on. But it's just little things that you don't think about, or I didn't think about at the time, that I did after he comes in and tells me stuff like that. But it happens that fast that, within seconds, you've got to be able to explain who's in it, who's involved, why, and all that, where you have a little more time in other sports to explain all that stuff. But in racing, like we know there's no breaks.
Yeah. You're a big-time golfer. I wanted to talk about another business opportunity that you're involved in.
Yes.
The 500 Club.
Yeah.
What is
in
that?
Statesville. It was a golf course that some of our buddies that play golf, one guy happened to look and saw there was a for sale of a golf course. And the real estate listing, he sent it out to a group of us and was like, does anybody want to buy a golf course? And I was like, that sounds pretty cool. That seems fun. So we went and played the golf course, and after about 6 holes, we're like, this is a great golf course. We need to be serious about this.
Yeah.
And so we ended up, I'm an investor. I'm a small investor, but I bought a golf course.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of cool to say, I own a golf course. But it's really, we put a lot into it, redid all the, the buildings and the interiors and the bar and everything about it, refurbished. And I did a lot of that, or helped with a lot of that. And it was just fun to be a part of. But yeah, I love golf. It's a great sport. It's fun.
Yep. It's also a restaurant that you can go and have lunch and dinner. It's called the 500 Club.
Yep.
In where?
A lot of pictures, by the way. Can we?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Say whatever you want to say.
So, Junior, I went to you because we wanted a racing theme. And so I came to you and I said, hey, you got any pictures or whatever that I could put up? And you immediately take me back, and you had so many pictures that were almost warehoused, I guess. Yeah. And you're like, pick them out, put whatever you want. So literally there are some very unique things in the 500 Club inside the restaurant. Yeah. And I will say in the men's restroom upstairs, there's a picture that you gave us. And you said this needs to be in your restaurant somewhere. And so it is. But if you are able to visit in Statesville, the 500 Club, and you're a guy, you can go into there, and that's one of Junior's pictures.
The other neat thing about this is if you win a Daytona 500, you're an automatic member.
That's correct.
So I'm a member.
You are a member. Yep.
And they have the best buffalo chicken wings.
They're really good.
And
the food is delicious.
The food is delicious.
Yeah. And that was initially, we were thinking golf is going to be, people are going to want to come to this place because the golf course is really nice. It's beautiful. And our superintendent does a great job. But ultimately, we ended up getting some chefs that are just amazing at the things they cook. And so we have great food and live entertainment and lots of things that I think the whole community, kind of that Statesville, Troutman, that area, they've very much embraced it. But also, kind of the Lake Norman area too is enjoying it.
The 500 Club in Statesville, go check it out. They're putting a lot into it. Great restaurant. Again, some of the best buffalo chicken wings that I can find around here. Man, it's been a lot of fun talking to you.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing me on.
One of the things that I wanted people to know was, and some people do know this, but some might not, you're incredibly talented.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
You have, you have a lot of years left in the tank, and I know that the message might not be out there that you still do want to be a play-by-play guy, especially in NASCAR. And I wanted that message to be clear. But I also wanted people to know that you're doing well. You're happy.
I am.
You're having fun.
Yep.
You're busy.
Yes.
And
I'll get those swings finished for you.
Yep. I hope so. You got a son overseas playing professional basketball.
Yep.
So you have a lot going on in your family.
Yep. Another son works in the movie industry on the West Coast,
Yep.
down in the Hollywood area. So, yeah, my kids are about as far apart as you can get,
for sure.
But still very proud of everything they're accomplishing.
Well, we're thankful to call you a friend. Glad to be able to spend some time with you today. Thanks for bringing Isla's chair. She's going to be excited to have it back. I had no idea how connected to this thing she was. She loves this chair. She was in tears.
And there's countersink bits.
Yeah.
So if you ever get to the point where you need that.
And a hat.
And
got my bits in my hat.
There's numerous things.
Yep. So thank you, Rick Allen. Thanks for being a friend here at Dirty Mo Media. It's been a lot of fun.
Appreciate you, buddy.
Rick Allen on the Dale Jr. Download. Rick Swigger.
There are no Schwiegers in NASCAR.
So it was great to catch up with Rick Allen. And I worked with Rick for 7 years. There were a couple of contracts during that period of time, and it was always a bit nervous. There was always some nervous energy around the time when those contracts were being negotiated. And Rick was the kind of guy that, like, we were his friends. We were his inner circle. And so when anything was going on in his life that had concern, he would come and talk to us, me and Burton and Letarte, and probably more Burton and Letarte because of how long they'd been together. But it got pretty tough in that final year. I was dealing with my own negotiations and how that didn't really work out the way I think NBC and I wanted. And then Rick was dealing with his own as well. And so it was tough to see that happen because, we'd all kind of really gotten to where we enjoyed working together. And, I was if I ended up staying at NBC, I was looking forward to working with Diffie too, because I'd worked with him in the past. So you just kind of know, you just kind of go with however things are going to go, and I don't get to make those kind of decisions on who's in the booth and who's not. But I did want the opportunity, I guess, today to let him share with everybody that he wants to be in this business and still wants to be doing that job, right? And that he's not willingly, sort of taking this new direction or path. That he kind of would prefer to be calling races somewhere at some point. And maybe that opportunity still exists down the road. But with the way the hiring cycle works, the contracts are 3 to 5 years. And so it's going to be some time before I think he might get another opportunity. But I see him as one of the most talented guys out there. And like I said in the show, I didn't really appreciate his talent until I tried to do the job he does. And then I was like, oh man, just incredible. And it was fun working with him. And he's a great friend. Really one of the best guys. Like if it's when you had something going on, and he did this for everybody. Anytime anything was going on that was challenging, whether it was somebody in the production team, he knew. And he would always go to that person and be like, hey, I'm sorry about this. I heard about this. What can I do? How can I help? He's one of those kind of people that kind of knows anytime anybody's going through anything challenging, he's going to be the guy to speak up and offer some assistance. And I think as critical as people can be about the broadcast from time to time, I think it's a pretty confident assumption that me and Rick and Burton and Letarte together in that NBC booth was some good work. And I felt like we always did a great job and had fun doing it. People would say that it was like a couple buddies just sitting around watching a race. That's hard to replicate. But it was tough to acknowledge that those days were going to be over, and we have to kind of work through the awkwardness of that process. And even in this new hiring cycle, I wanted to be a friend to Rick, and tried to introduce him to the right people so that he would also have the right considerations for certain opportunities. And I really am not I probably don't understand the landscape as much as a lot of people might assume. But I was kind of disappointed that he didn't find a place to be able to continue forward. But hopefully, again, that opportunity exists for him somewhere. If not, and he finally closes the door on that, I think that he will be insanely happy building, because he's real good at it. And I think if if the world were to know the quality of work, but also the way, I'm not sure he's totally ready to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Come see what I got and can help you with. Because he's kind of he's bullshit about the website stuff, not knowing nothing about that. I don't think he's ready to close one door and completely open the next one. But I think once he does, if he ever did embrace the woodworking business, he would I think he'd probably be he'd make more money doing that than he's doing as a broadcaster. Anyhow, awesome to catch up with him. I know there's a lot of people out there that have good and critical opinions of him and his work over the years, but everybody's absolutely curious as to where he's been and what he's been doing. So I think for that reason alone, it was great to have him on and see him, catch up with him. So appreciate him coming through. It's time for the white flag. All right, for this week, there was no race in the Cup Series, so the teardown Actions Detrimental, and Door Bumper Clear all will be returning next week after the Talladega race to give their critical thoughts on everything going on. I'm curious as to what kind of race we're going to see. I'm sure it's probably going to be more of the same, a lot of fuel mileage and savings. We'll see what the conversation is when we leave Talladega and what everybody's thinking. Yesterday, me and TJ had a fun episode of Dirty Air where we talked a little bit about Rockingham and a couple different things in our going on in the industry. The Hall of Fame is getting ready to nominate or vote on the nominees for the next class. And they did announce that Homestead will be the championship final for 2026, but then it will start to rotate from track to track. Unknown what those tracks are in the future, but we can debate that. We had a great Dirty Mo Doe segment where we, I believe, made some pretty reasonable picks going into a race that's quite unpredictable at Talladega. So you'll have to listen to those. I wish I could bet, man, because I feel pretty good about this week's. But next episode of Bless Your Heart will be recorded tomorrow. Me and Amy always have a lot of fun doing that on Thursdays, so we're going to get right back to it. We're coming off of vacation in Texas. A lot of fun to be had. Amy's grandmother gave her a hard time about her work on Bless Your Heart. We'll talk about that. Ooh. Yeah. And so, yeah, I guess Speed Street's got an episode this week as well. Connor Daly bringing great content every week. And then Herm and Schrader, that's a great podcast. They'll have an episode as well out today. Still wish they'd have called that Stacking Kenny's. That's the week. Andrew.
And make sure to visit shop.dirtymomedia.com. I think you're wearing a sweatshirt.
I am.
On the website.
I got a Dirty Mo Media sweatshirt on. We got a lot of great apparel at shop.dirtymomedia.com. If you're a favorite of any of our podcasts, there's a shirt, a sweater, a hat for you. And there's always new designs being put on there, so keep checking at shop.dirtymomedia.com. If you got an idea of something you'd like to see, a T-shirt or a hat that you want made, let us know down in the comments, and we'll see if we can't drum that up for you. Everybody have a great week. We'll see you tomorrow for Bless Your Heart, and on to Talladega. I'm going to Orange County, where the Cars Tour is going on Saturday. So
that'll be fun.
I'm going to go help them folks out. We'll see you.